In this section, we are going to be building a movie explorer using the IMDB dataset. This movie explorer will allow us to filter movies based on year, rating, and genres. We are going to use the slider input for the year. We are going to also use the slider input for the rating and use check boxes for the genres. In the last video, in the previous section, I taught you on how you can create a slider input, but that slider input you created as a single side. In this section, I'm going to show you how you are going to create a slider input that has double side. So let's get started and start building this app. First of all, we go and create our Shiny file. Let's name it movie exp and create. So the screen is going to show. So we have our blank screen. Now, for us to be able to create a movie explorer, we need a movie dataset. So we are going to be using the IMDB dataset, which usually comes with the ggplot2 package, but now it has a library on its own. It's a package on its own. So we are going to install that package first. Install those packages. ggplot2 movies. That is the name. So I already have it installed already on my system. So then you are going to load it, library, ggplot2. So after installing the ggplot2 movies, you load the ggplot2 package. So you can see it's already loaded on my system. So let's have a view of this data set. So the name of the data set is movies. So I'm going to check the documentation to know more about it. Movie information reading. So we can see we have 228,819 rows and 24 variables. So we say it means we have 28,819 movies and 24 variables. So out of those 24 variables, we have the title of the movie, the year the movie was released, the total budget in US dollars, the length in minutes, and the rating, the IMDb user rating, and also the number of IMDb users who rated these movies. So we also have the R1 to R10. So this is multiplying by 10 gives the percentile of users who rated this movie. So this is just like the percentile who rated these movies. So we have the MPAA rating. We have also the genres: action, animation, comedy, drama, documentary, romance, short. And these genres are actually stored in binary variables. So that is 0 and 1, where 0 would denote that this movie doesn't belong to this genre, while 1 would denote that the movie actually belongs to that genre. So let's view the data. So now you can see our data. This is the title, this is the year, this is the length, this is the budget, this is the rating, this is the votes, and also we have the percentile R1 to R10. We also have the column MPA, and here are the genres. So you can see the genres, they are stored in what? Binary variables, 0 and 1. So if we see 0, it means that this movie doesn't belong to action, but it belongs to comedy and drama. So some movies may actually belong to two genres. So you can see this, it belongs to comedy and also belongs to drama. So we might not be using all the columns in this data set. We only need the title, we need the year, we need the length, we don't need the length, and also we don't need the budget, because we can see that the budget has missing values, but we need the rating. And also we need the genres. So I'm just going to create a simple movie explorer. If you feel like adding any column at the end of this, at the end of building this app, then you can use that as an exercise to see what and what you have understood, to add columns that I didn't add at the end. So now let's create a variable for the data. I'm going to call it dataset, or let's call it data movies. So when we run this, we can see that our variable has already been stored as data. So this data we are going to be using to refer to this dataset in our Shiny app. Now we already have our data ready, so we are going to call our boilerplate, hit tab, so we can get started. So we are going to first of all start with the UI, the user interface as usual. In this lecture, we are going to be setting up the page. So I told you that when you want to build a page like this, we are going to be using a page with a sidebar. So this page is going to have a sidebar panel and also the main panel with the header panel that is going to give us the title of the page. So we are going to first of all call the page with sidebar function, sidebar. So in it, we are going to have three functions: header panel, sidebar panel, and the main panel. The header panel is going to carry the title. The sidebar panel is going to carry the element on the sidebar, that is the inputs, while the main panel is going to give us our output, which is our filtered movie titles. So we start with the header panel. So I'm going to name this header panel Movie Explorer. Then we go to the sidebar panel. We type it, and also what to type the main panel. Sorry. So now let's run the app and see. So you can see our header panel, the Movie Explorer. You can see our sidebar panel, and you can now see our main panel. So this is where our input is going to be going to. This is where our output is going to be coming out from, and this is our header. So now we're going to import the contents of the sidebar panel and the main panel. First, we start with the sidebar panel. So the sidebar panel is going to take the inputs, while the main panel is going to take the outputs. So now, as I explained earlier on, we are going to be using the year and the rating, and also the gens to filter movie titles out of our data set. So we're going to be using a slider input for the year and the rating, and we'll be using checkbox inputs for the gens, the various gens that we have. That is action, animation, comedy, drama, documentary, romance, and short. So first of all, now we start with that of the year reading. We say slider inputs. Slider inputs. So first of all, we have to give our input ID, then our label, then the minimum value on the slider, then the maximum value on the slider. We also give our default value on the slider, and also give the slider step. These are the important arguments that we need in this function. So first of all, we'll start our slider input ID. The input ID, we're going to give the input ID as year, then the label. So this is the label that's going to be displayed on the user interface, the screen. We give it as year. The minimum. So let's check the minimum here on our data. Let's see. So we want to know the minimum and maximum of the year variable on the data set. So say data. So the minimum year is 1893, while the maximum year is 2005. So that's what we're going to be using as the minimum and maximum. So we'll say the minimum is equals to 1893, maximum 2005. And the default value, let's give the default value as 1999. And give the step. That reminds me, we are going to be using a double-ended slider. So we're not going to give a single default value. We are going to give two default value in a vector form. So we're going to say what? Let's give two values. Let's say 1960, 1999. So I'm going to explain in the server side how we are going to use these two values. Then step of 1. So this is our slider input. So let's run the app and see. So you can see how we gave the double-ended slider inputs. We gave a default value of 1960, I'll give that of 1999. If in the filtering you want to make use of 1 year, you just bring one of these sliders and you are allowed to merge it with the other slider, so you can get a filtering of 1960. So you can see, if I want to get that of 1993, I can just bring that other slider to this side. So that is how you can use it. So this two-ended slider can also be used as a one-ended slider. So if I wanted to make it a one-ended slider, I'm just going to remove this. I'm going to remove this and just use a single value. I'll run the app. So you can see I only have a single-ended slicer. So that is how you can create a double-ended slicer on your user interface. How we are going to use this slider, the two values in this slider input, I'll explain in the server side. So the next thing now, we're going to go to do that. We're going to do that of the rating. So let me just copy this line. Just going to copy this line and paste it here. So this is the slider input also for the rating. I'm going to change this to rating. I also change this also to rating. So we have to also know the minimum and maximum rating we have. So we are going to say range, data. So our rating. So it is the range of 1 to 10. So that is what we are going to be using, 1 and 10. So same thing too, also we want to make this rating range, we want to make this rating a double-ended slider. So we're going to say, let's just give a default value of 3 to 7, and we'll give it a step of, we have decimal points in our rating, so we're going to be using a step of 0.1, so that anytime we move from a number to another number, we're moving by a step of 0.1. So let's run the app and see. So we forgot to put a comma at this place, you can see. So always take notes for things like this, little things like this. We have a comma, and let's run the app. So you can see we have a double-ended slider which is moving by a step of 0.1. So this is what we are going to be using on that. This is the input that our server is going to be taking from the user interface. So same thing too, also if you want to filter for 4.2, a rating of 4.2, we just move one of this slider, we move it to the 4.2, the slider on the 4.2, and you can see what we have, like a single word slider. So that is how you use the double-ended slider. So let's close the app. So we are done with our slider inputs. So next we are going to do now is for the gens. If you notice, the gens I told you they are on various variables. So each variable is a gen. So we have a column called action, we have a column called animation, we have a column called comedy, we have a column called drama, we have a column called documentary, we have a column called romance, and we have a column called shorts. And I say that some of these movies belongs to more than one gen. Some belong to only a single gen. So for us to be able to tackle that problem, we're going to make use of a checkbox in such a way that we're going to design the user interface in such a way that the user is going to have the opportunity to be able to select more than one checkbox. So you can tick on a single gen checkbox, you can tick on 2 gen checkbox, you can tick on 3 gen text box. So that's what we're going to do next, the checkbox inputs. So this is the checkbox. It's also one of the functions you are going to be using on your user interface, one of the input functions in the user interface. So the checkbox takes the input ID, just like I've explained, the slider input and numeric input. It has a label and it also has a value. So this value is usually binary, either true or false. So that is what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using the default value of false, which will make the checkbox to be unchecked. So when we tick on the checkbox or we give a default value of true, the checkbox is going to be checked. So now our first checkbox, which is going to be action, input ID, action. Then the next is going to be label. We're going to give action as the label and value, which is equal to false. So you can see I did not put my comma. Your punctuations are very, very important, especially when building a Shiny app. Sometimes your app won't run just because of a single missing punctuation. So now we already have our first checkbox. You can see value is equal to false. So let's run the app. So you can see. So most of the time you will see the app looking like this. So this is the view you are going to have if you have to view the web app on a mobile device. So you can see it the way it is looking like. So the result is going to be down. It's going to be at the bottom of the page. So, but when you are going to view it on desktop, this is how your app is going to look like. So that is why anytime you minimize the app, you see the app looking like this. The sidebar panel is going to be up, it's going to be showing up, while the main panel is going to be shown down. So now let's complete the remaining checkbox inputs. So before we do that, let's give a heading. Let's use H3 heading to give our gens. So punctuation. So let's run the app. So you can see now we have given the title gens. So now let's complete the remaining gens. Ctrl V. So I'm going to be pasting 6 or 5 gens. Okay, sorry. The punctuation is very important. Always take note. The punctuation is very important. So your punctuation is very important. Okay. So I think how many we have here? 1, 2, 3. We have 7. So we have action. Then the next is going to be animation. So we are going to have animation. Then the next is going to be comedy. We're going to have comedy as the label. The input ID also, the next one is going to be drama. We're going to have drama as the label. The next one is going to be documentary. So I'm going to have documentary as the label. The next one is going to be romance. Then we'll have romance as the label. The next one is going to be shorts. Then we have shorts as our label. And the default value for all of them is going to be false. So let's run the app and see what we have. So you can see our gens. You can check on the box. So you can check on the box to check for a particular gen. So we are done with all the inputs. We are done with our sidebar panel. So now let's go to the main panel. The main panel will only have one output, which is movie title. Movie titles. So we are going to be using table outputs because it's a table. The filter we are going to be getting is going to be a table, so we are going to be using table output. So table output is going to give us a table. So we cannot use verbatim text output in this situation, or let's use text output. The right function for us to use is going to be table output when we are dealing with tables, because we are going to be using the dplyr package to filter our data. Movie titles. So this is going to be the name of the output variable. This is going to be the name we are going to give the output variable, so that in our server function we are going to refer to this name. So that this UI is going to refer to the output we are giving the server function to bring out the filtered movie titles. So that's all for the user interface. Let me run this app so that I can have a final view of it. So we're already done with our user interface. We are done with our inputs. So the next lecture, we are going to tackle the server side. So before we get started with our server side, we have to use the dplyr library to filter our data. So that is what we're going to be using on our server side. So if you don't have dplyr installed on your PC, you ought to install those packages and install the dplyr. So I already have it installed on my system, so this is the code that you're going to be using. You type in install the packages, then dplyr. So now let me go and load the package library dplyr. So dplyr is usually used for data cleaning, data manipulation. That is what the package is usually used for. You can read more on it if you haven't used it before. So there's one thing with this dplyr. So there is a pipe operator that is usually used. For those of you that have been using the tidyverse, you have come across it. Data. Then when you press Shift Ctrl M on your keyboard, you have the pipe operator. So the previous pipe operator usually used to be this, but this is RNative's pipe operator. So I'm going to be using RNative pipe operator. I'm going to be using RNative's pipe operator throughout this section. But if you are comfortable with this, For those of you that have previous version of RStudio, you might not have this add native type operator. So this is just for the current version of RStudio. So if you want to use the previous type operator, so you can, and you are using the current version of RStudio, you can just go to Tools, go to Global Options, come to Code, click on Code, and you uncheck this box, Use Native Type Operator. So if your RStudio is the current version and you don't want to use the native type operator, you uncheck this box. But if you want to use the native type operator, you check the box. So I'm going to be using native type operator throughout. So now let's use the filter function on our data. Filter. We want to filter our data. So first of all, we're going to filter by year. We're going to use the between function. It will allow us to filter between 2-year ranges. So we're going to filter between 2-year ranges, year. Then let's say, for example, we want to filter the year 1990, comma. I also want to filter for the year 2003. So this is the first filtering. Then the next, we also use the between for the rating. Between, we give our rating variable first in the between argument. Then we are going to filter it between 2 ratings. So let's say, for example, 5 and 6. Then the next, we are going to filter for action. Action. So action is equals to, for example, let's say action is equals to 1. And let's say animation is equals to 0. So that means we are filtering now. If you look at what we have written so far, we are filtering for the year between 1990 to 2003. We are filtering for the rating between 5 and 6. And we're also filtering for action, which is equals to 1. Action, that is if the movie is an action movie. And if the now, for now, I'm going to be using only 1 gen in this filtering. So if the movie is an action movie, we're going to say action is equals to 1. Then we now give the remaining gens as 0. So that means the movie is an action movie. Then we'll now say animation, then we'll now say comedy. It's equals to 0. Then the next is going to be drama. It's equals to 0. Then the next is going to be documentary. It's equals to 0. Then the next is going to be romance. It's equals to 0. And the next is going to be shorts, which is 0. So now we are filtering for the year between 1990 and 2003, rating between 5 and 6, action is equals to 1. That means the movie is an action movie and the other gens are left as 0. So now let's run this. So you can see our table. When you look at it, you can see, so this is what we are expecting. But mind you, in our web app, we are expecting only the title. We need only the title. So that means if we go back to our filtering, I'm now going to say select title. Select title. So I'm going to carry what? Only 1 column. So if I should run this now, we're going to get only the title of the movies. So you can see, we're only going to get the title of the movies. So that is for the filtering that I just gave. Now also, you can see I want to also change this title to what? Movie title. So that when it comes out, it's going to be showing movie title. Or let's say movies. Let's leave it as movies. So we also rename the column. Rename movies. In the rename, it's going to take the initial name of the column, that is title, then the new name of the column, movies is equals to title. So the new name we are giving the column. So it's going to take the initial name of the column first, then it's going to take the new name that we are giving in the column. So you can read more on the dplyr, and I will also drop a cheat sheet for the dplyr, so which you can use to check through and see how the dplyr function works if you have never worked with the dplyr before. So now if I'm to run this, so you can see Too Fast to Furious, you can see the movies that I have under my filter. So in the next lecture, I'm going to show you how we are going to use this filtering in our server side. So now we are ready to start building our server side. So let's refer back to the user interface. So if you check our main panel, so we gave our outputs as movie titles. So which means the user interface is going to refer to the output movie titles at the server. So now we create the output variable movie titles. So now, if you can see, we used table output in this place, meaning that we're going to be using a render function of render output. We're going to use render table to render the table that is going to be giving us after filtering our data. So now this is our function render table. So this is going to render the table that is produced by the filtering. So now let's copy the whole of this and we'll just make some little tweaks in it. So I'm going to copy everything there and we paste it in this place. So now what we want this output to do is to filter, just as I've showed you in the previous video, to filter the data based on the year, the rating, and the gens. So now we are going to be replacing each of these values one by one by the inputs. So we're going to say inputs, then which input specifically, then we signify the words, the year, the input year. So we give the input ID as year. The next one to also input year. Now, I told you earlier on that we are going to be using a double-ended slider input in this web app. If you check it now, you can see that we have two values in this place. So how are we going to use two values inside that server side? So the thing is that when we use a single value, then we can use input here. But if we have two values in our slider, then we are going to index it. So the first value or the lower range is going to be given by what? Index of 1. So you can see it. And the other range is going to be given by what? Index of 2. So that is how we are going to signify the input it is going to take from the year. So we are already having two inputs inside that particular slider input for year. So the lower range is going to take it as input year, index of 1. And the upper range is going to take it as input year, index of 2. Same thing too, we're also going to do at this place. We're going to say input, rating. They will now give index of 1. Year 2 also, input, rating. We give an index of 2. And we change all this default. All this, we are going to change all this. Also, going to become input, action. So you can see the ID we gave. We gave the ID as action, animation, comedy, and so on. So we're also going to refer each input. We are going to change each of these values to their respective inputs. Input, animation, this one is also going to be input, comedy. Then that of drama is going to be input, drama. That of documentary is going to be input, documentary. That of romance is going to be input, romance. Then that of short is going to be input, short. So now you can see how the filtering we did earlier on, you can see how we are using it now in our server side. So we are done with the server side. You can see how easy it is. So now let's run the web app and see. So now you can see our web app. So if I have to filter this here now, you can see it's changing. So you can see it is changing. So you can see. So now let's just, I want to take for the year 2005 now. I'm only filtering for the year 2005 and for movies with rating above 8.3. Let's see movies with rating above 8.3. Movies with rating above 8.3. Now let's see which of these belongs to action. If I click on action, so these are the ones that belong to action. Good Night Charlie, Home for the Bullets, and A Sin City. So let's see the ones that also belong to animation. So we have no movies under animation. Okay, let's see. We have no movies under animation. Let's see under comedy. We have movies under comedy. So we have movies under drama. So that is for 2005 and rating 8.3 to 10. So you can see how easy it is at the server side. How I've already built our server side. within just few lines of code. So now that is all. That is all for building the Movie Explorer.